Welcome, friend. I am Merritt Onsa, your dream coach and host of the Devoted Dreamers podcast. And I believe God has an unfolding plan for your life, a God-shaped dream just for you. But there are mountains to climb between you and that dream, like fear, comparison, imposter syndrome. And what if I mess this up? Or maybe the next right step is just evading you, or you're constantly feeling overwhelmed or stuck. I promise you are not alone. And that's why I'm here, to bring you stories from sisters in Christ who have been there and have made it out on the other end. Stick around and you'll find a new episode every Wednesday morning and once a month a solo where I will coach you through the stages of following our God-shaped dreams and provide fuel for the fire that's already burning in your heart. If you're ready to find some real traction for your dream instead of sitting on the sidelines, subscribe to the show and then meet me back here every week for transformational tools to help you release the lies so you can freely show up in the world with your gifts, leaning on God in your weaknesses, and serving His kingdom with the dream He's given you. Hello, devoted dreamers. I'm so glad you're here today for this solo episode. And I must confess, this is my first recording in my new office. And I've got some makeshift stuff going on in here that I would love to have you see and laugh along with me about how I'm trying to get the sound right for this episode. But I am super excited. I've been planning this solo episode for you for a long time. But before we get into the meat of all of that, do you have a sense that God has given you a message to share, but you're still just trying to find the right vehicle with which to share it? Have you ever considered starting a podcast, but you worried that the techie side would be way over your head? I feel you. I totally felt that way too. In today's on-the-go world, podcasting is the way to go. I mean, you're listening to this podcast, right? And you may have heard that I spent the first quarter of 2021 creating and beta testing a podcasting course. And I am so excited to announce that this course, called Your Purposeful Podcast, is soon ready for new students. If you are looking for a simple step-by-step framework to finally launch your podcast, Your Purposeful Podcast is the course that will get you there. As you know, I am passionate about serving as your trail guide on the journey to discovering and pursuing your God-shaped dream. I have 5 years of podcasting under my belt, which I've spent figuring out systems for efficiency and making the most of my time in front of the mic so I can still be incredibly involved with my 2 young daughters, be a wife, take on unexpected homeschooling, and launch my own business. You can find the time. For this course, Natalie Arndt is our guest expert. She's a brand strategist and host of Presence and Purpose, a podcast about personal branding, faith, and business strategy for Christian women entrepreneurs. Her insight in this new course is priceless. Natalie teaches everything you need to know to create well-branded strategic messaging for your podcast that's keyword friendly in order to grow your dream, whether it's a business, ministry, hobby, whatever you've got. If you're going to do the work, you want your words to hit the right sets of headphones. And that's what Natalie is going to bring to this conversation. This simple step-by-step framework is just what you need to finally get launched. The doors are opening on July 12th, and the sooner you sign up, the sooner you will have what it takes to launch your podcast into the world. I will be with you all along the way during this self-paced learning journey. And you'll have access to monthly office hours with me and a Facebook group with past and present students who have or are in the process of launching their podcasts. Want to know more? You will find all the details at my website, merrittonsa.com/yourpurposefulpodcast. And now on to today's solo episode. In this one, I wanted to talk about rest. And if you're in my Facebook group, you've probably already shared that you need to talk or at least think about this topic too. And I am talking today about real rest from the intensity of our lives, our daily commitments, and yes, even from our God-shaped dreams. So here's a little bit of a summary of what I'm going to cover in this episode, how opening up post-pandemic has brought this topic of rest to the forefront of my mind, some of the symptoms I noticed in myself and recognizing that I needed more rest, the really difficult decisions I made to let go of some of the demands upon myself and my time. And along with that, like the temptation not to rest and the threat that is to our dream. We'll talk about what happens when we do rest and figuring out what kinds of rest are actually restorative for you. So this has come to the forefront of my mind because of necessity and like sheer exhaustion. Post-pandemic, I am honestly so out of practice at doing as many things as I was doing prior to lockdown in March of 2020. And so my tolerance for the go, 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 go life has diminished. And honestly, I'm okay with that. The symptoms that I noticed, the most obvious one is that I'm just tired. I wake up from a full night of sleep tired. And probably even, that in itself is convicting, but more troublesome to me is that I really have not had a lot of new creative ideas like I used to. There's just kind of this silence in my mind that used to hum almost constantly with new inspiration. Now, I'm not saying that constant hum was a good thing, but I just sense that the fact that there's not a lot of new inspiration coming, it's that my body and my mind and my soul and my spirit are just weary. And then another symptom I noticed at the end of season 8, that I was pushing myself so hard to just get things done. And I found it really difficult to get excited about the next season. I wanted to be excited about it. I was taking some purposeful time off. But even in that, I was like, oh, I'm not there yet. I am not yet excited about season 9. So like I said, I made the decision to take the entire month of May off from producing new episodes. If you've been around here for a while, you may have noticed there was nothing new in the month of May. But I also took the entire week of my birthday, which is the first week of May, off from all work-related endeavors. At the time, we were still homeschooling, and just that weariness in my soul, I knew that I needed to do a little bit something more than just stop publishing 4 podcast episodes. So for taking that first week off from the podcast and from work, that meant that I chose to delay my recordings for season 9 by a week from my original plan, because just that push to get it all done was too much. Little side note here, you take time off from publishing episodes doesn't mean you can necessarily take time off from recording them, because those deadlines come back pretty quickly. But I needed to do that. And it honestly took 4 days into that week of my birthday to really find a desire to sit back down at my desk. I was so burned out that I was like, nope, no desire, no excitement. And even though I had that after like 4 days of just playing with my kids and being outside, I still held off. I stayed with my original commitment of taking that week off. So maybe you feel this if you're anything like me, if you're driven, if you're an Enneagram 3. I'm an Enneagram 1, by the way, but just kind of always feeling like I need to be on top of stuff. There is a huge temptation to not rest. I feel like I'm missing out on something. And those work hours are hours I'm never going to get back. And for our family, and probably for yours too, work equals money, equals provision for our family. And it was really hard to let go of having to do something to help provide for our family. I had to make that choice. And the other thing was that I had just recently begun planning out my weeks on Sunday nights. And when I came to Sunday night and was like, oh, wait, I'm not working this week, I really started to worry that I would lose some momentum on this particular habit that I was trying so hard to form. And, again, feeling like this rest was going to mess something up for me. Right? That sounds absurd now that I'm even saying it. But I kept telling myself there was purpose in it. I kept saying no, I need it. My body is calling for it. And that purpose, I might not ever see it. Might not become super evident or clear to me, but I still needed it. I was at the end of my rope, and could I have kept pushing? Probably. I probably could have, But should I? And what would have been the cost if I did? Now, around the same time as all of these thoughts were spinning around in my mind of how tired I was and worn out and a little bit burned out, I started listening to podcasts again. I know that sounds a little bit ironic, but in May, I was exercising more, which felt really good. And that meant I was more available to take in some new voices, and it sure helped on my difficult runs to have somebody inspirational to listen to. And I happened upon John Acuff's new podcast called All You Need Is a Goal. And he was interviewing Greg McKeown, who you've probably heard of as the best-selling author of the book Essentialism. And if you follow me on Instagram, I talked about this in my stories early in May. But in case you haven't heard, Greg has written a new book called Effortless. And it was the result of realizing how burned out he was after going on this whirlwind excitement after Essentialism really took off. And when I heard Greg and John talking about this concept of effortless, of not just doing what's essential, but looking at our work in terms of how can I make this work easier? How can I make it fun and enjoyable instead of, I just need to work harder to get it all done. It was this mind shift for me. It felt revolutionary. So I ended up listening to Greg's podcast, and there he gives away chapter 4 of his new book, Effortless. The chapter is called Making It Easier to Do What Matters Most. And again, my mind was blown just listening to this, and it made so much sense. He told this story about a coach for a professional baseball team who prioritized downtime and the art of doing nothing with his players, even in like a really intense part of the season in the month of August. Instead of overworking his players with hours of practice right up to the game, he instructed them to sleep in, to take naps in the afternoon, to only show up to games during this 1 week of August when player fatigue generally sets in, and to really spend the rest of the week resting. And remarkably, maybe not surprisingly, since this is what we're talking about, but his teams actually performed better after they had rest. So back to my own example, the outcome of the week of rest that I took in May. These were just minor things, but at one point, my eldest daughter said to me when we were spending time together in the afternoon, "Mom, what are you doing?" And it was this random out of the blue question, but I realized later she's used to me not being available for them in the afternoon because that was my work time. Instead, we were going on walks. I had freedom, like I said, to go for runs every morning. I was able to sit and play with my kids without the pressure to go or be somewhere else or to be productive. And I got to just see and enjoy what they enjoy. I got to observe them and play alongside them. This may be not profound to some of you, but I showered every day, which was one of the things that had kind of fallen off my radar as something that was a common habit for me because, you know, in my mind, showering, like how much time did that take? And then drying my hair and all of that. But getting to shower every day, I realized what a gift a shower was. I hadn't actually had a daily shower like 2 weeks in a row since before we had kids. I know, maybe a little bit gross, but it's just kind of noticing these shifts, these changes. And I'm not sure I paid much attention to this kind of stuff before. Also, I had more time in the Word. I was out of routine, which kind of was generally what helped me to be in the Word. But the days that I did choose to do it, I was so glad that I did. My takeaway from taking a week off, it was totally worth it. And honestly, I don't know how I would have made it through these last few months without that break and without a shift in my thinking. Because, as many of you know, in the midst of all of this, our family was getting ready to move to a new home. We joined households with my parents in early June. And while everyone, obviously knows that moving is a beating, I had kind of forgotten how much of a beating it was. With everything else I had going on, I had really underestimated all that it was going to take. I had not realized how much this was going to take out of me. And I was pushing again in June on all cylinders. and going through this major life transition, such a recipe for burnout and breakdown. And alongside all of this, right, as if I didn't need one more thing, my friend Courtney Davis, you may have heard her in episode 175. She recently launched this coaching business that I was learning about in late April, early May. We were talking about what she was working on. And right before the move, I decided to spend 2 weeks working through her life values realignment program. And on the surface, it felt like a terrible time to rethink routines and preconceived notions about how I spend my time, since I had way less time because of packing, preparing to put our house in the market, and moving our actual stuff while also caring for children. At one point, I even emailed Courtney with this subtle begging of her to let me not participate when I'd already committed to it. But you want to know what she said? She said, maybe this is the perfect time. And now, looking back on it, I think she was right. After the first week and a debrief with her and a couple other women on Zoom, that ended with me in tears. They were good, hard tears, but tears nonetheless. I was challenged to consider what kinds of rest are actually restorative for me. Kind of rest that's more than just chilling out on the couch and scrolling through social media or binge watching Netflix. No, what she was asking me to consider was real, actual rest that fuels you for the road ahead and the accompanying challenges that are bound to come. And I'd never actually thought about rest in this way. And so, in a huge sense, this episode is really thanks to Courtney. She put it beautifully as she talked to me and her other students about God and creation and how God made Adam on the 6th day. And then on day 7, Adam's first full day on earth, he had a day of rest. Whoa, I'd never thought about it that way. And Courtney helped me shift my mindset of rest being something that happens after work happens, because you're already worn out from your week and you just have to spend the weekend recuperating. No, given the Adam and the creation model that she shared, rest is actually what enables work. It comes first. When we are rested, we often do our best work. Our minds are free to play around with new ideas and get creative. We feel more open to new opportunities rather than desperate to squeeze every last minute out of the day because we have to. Working from a place of rest is so freeing. But so many of you, like me, have told me that you don't rest, that it evades you, that it's hard to create habits that prioritize rest. So I'm here to ask you to think about this for a minute for yourself. What does rest need to look like for you? Are you working so hard at whatever feels like work to you? It doesn't actually have to be paid work to feel like work. Are you working so hard that rest sounds like collapsing at the end of the day or the end of the week? And what would it take to shift your mindset to align more with what Courtney taught me about working from rest rather than working for or to earn rest? And then to support you in your journey as you figure out what this looks like for you, how might you begin to initiate conversations in your community and to build new language around work and rest so that you and your people could live more rested and thus more creative, more available to one another, and live life a little bit less on the hamster wheel of hustle. Now, I realize if you have never thought about rest in this way, it's going to take you more than a few minutes to figure out what this looks like for you. It's going to take experimenting with some things, because when Courtney asked me about it, I was like, I don't know. And I just had to sit with those questions for a little while. But here's what I've come up with. Here's how all of this has shaped some new strategies for me in my life. And these are just suggestions. It may not be the same for you. In fact, it's likely not the same for you. But I urge you, as it's still summer, and maybe summers are crazier for you than during the year because you have kids at home that you normally wouldn't. But hey, we've just lived through the COVID pandemic. So, why not take some time to think about what are some new habits that you could test out to see if you could figure out what restorative rest looks like to you. Okay, so these are the strategies I'm working on. I commit to observing the Sabbath. Right now, it just simply means not working in paid work or on the podcast on Sundays. And I haven't fully integrated this yet, but my heart is to get there. I still do my planning for the week on Sunday night, but I do that after I've spent the day with my church family, with my husband and kids and my parents. I don't do chores beyond maybe tossing a load of laundry in the washer, but I let it sit there or in the dryer overnight until I can fold it on Monday. And so whatever Sabbath could look like for you, that's been just one way for me to kind of accept that there is a day set aside for rest, and I'm allowed. In fact, I'm commanded to take it. So think about what Sabbath could look like for you. It doesn't have to be on a Sunday. If your day is a different day of the week, that's totally fine. But what would it look like to take one day and not work? Okay, so habit number 2 or strategy number 2, we try to do a really simple dinner on Sunday nights, which kind of goes along with the Sabbath theme. So we either do leftovers or on cooler days, it's something that, we threw into the crock pot and planned the day before. Or we might pick up a rotisserie chicken at the grocery store, just something that doesn't take a lot of energy to prepare in order for us to be fed and to clean up. Think about how many extra minutes you spend in the kitchen when you've prepared a meal. So that's one way I try to support the Sabbath habit. And then in our new home, we've just been here like a month at the time that this podcast episode is going to go live. I have begun a new ritual of sitting outside on our patio in the morning right after waking up. And sometimes my kids are with me, sometimes my husband or my parents, but even if I'm sitting there alone, I pause to listen to bird song and we watch the world wake up. For some reason, my body just automatically wakes up at 6 o'clock right now. And here in Colorado in the summer, between 6:30 and 7:30, we get to watch the hot air balloons rise up into the sky from Boulder County on most days from our patio. So our little family of 6 gathers. As each person wakes up, we linger, we chat, we think about the day, and sometimes we just sit in silence. Once someone expresses hunger, we go inside to take care of that. But starting out the day from a place of rest and being outside has been so nourishing for my soul. And I even began to realize that having a space that I could dedicate to that, and that when I look at that space, even during the day, I begin to long for those quiet mornings where the birds are chirping and it's mostly quiet. There's not so much traffic yet that we can hear from our home, and just watching the world wake up. And then strategy number 4, we've implemented family walks. It's not an everyday thing, but when we do it, it's usually sometime after dinner, before the kids take a bath. As we were preparing to leave our old home, it was a sweet way to say goodbye to the neighborhood. And now in our new neighborhood, it's been fun to kind of have it be an orientation to this new space and who's out that time of night and where do the kids live and that kind of thing. And then it's just this sweet time of being together and moving our bodies. Now, that doesn't mean someone hasn't totally lost it before we make it back to the house. But just, again, getting to be outside, to be together, and have it be a time dedicated to something that's more restful has been really great. And I'm sure there are more things that I've implemented. These were just the 4 things that I could come up with on the fly in preparing for this episode. And honestly, like I said, I'm still a newbie just figuring this out. It is not perfect in its implementation by any means, but I do believe that we have to start engaging in a new practice, whatever that is, for a little while before we start to notice any of the cumulative effects. At least that's what it has felt like for me. I want it to be one and done, but that is not how rest works. That's all I have for you today, but just to recap, in this episode, we talked about how opening up post-pandemic has grown in me an awareness for my need for more rest. Some of the symptoms that I noticed in myself indicating that I was lacking rest. The hard decisions I had to make to let go of some demands that I was giving into that were wearing me out. The temptation not to rest and the threat that is to our dream, the loss of creativity and new ideas. And then what happens when we do rest? The benefits, right? That's what we all want, is the benefits of actually feeling rested. And then figuring out finally what kinds of rest are actually restorative for me. And I hope that you can spend some time thinking about what is actually restorative to you. I do wonder how this hits you today. And as this episode comes to a close, I want you to ask yourself these questions. What kind of rest feels restorative to me? And then how can I begin to shift my mindset in order to put rest before work and not as an afterthought? I'm so honored you listened to this episode today, but don't let the conversation end here. If you have a thought, a question, a comment, or even a topic you want to explore further, let's connect over in the Devoted Dreamers Facebook group. We are building an encouraging community of like-minded women because we were never meant to do this alone. You can find the group at bit.ly/dreamergroup.